Good evening, everyone. Today is June 14th, 2021. It is about 6 p.m. 6:01 p.m. at 77 degrees, and we are basically right in downtown Hilo. It's been a little while since I've done this walk, so I wanted to just get some footage. Kind of beautiful evening, some rain clouds. Got the cemetery in the distance. It's like a Japanese cemetery in the distance. You can kind of see it. You know, back before I moved here, back before I moved to Hawaii, back in November I moved here, and before that I'd gone through kind of a rough period prior. It was in the middle of the worst parts of the pandemic before we got the vaccines going and everything. It was during the initial lockdowns and everything. I got to meet. I ended up losing my job, and I ended up being. How's it? I ended up being homeless for a little bit, for a few months, first time in my life, and I ended up meeting a couple from California who during the lockdown. So during the coronavirus pandemic, during the lockdown, there was a point where we were quarantined inside a homeless shelter. So they actually wouldn't let us leave the premises unless it was for dire needs, like medical or some official business, because for the most part even people there who were getting back on their feet, who had jobs, their jobs basically told them to stay home. They were basically quarantining everyone at home. So even places of work were not allowing people to come in. So in general, you had to have a special reason to be able to leave the premises of the homeless shelter, the homeless shelter's grounds. And at the time, I had a car, and the couple that I'd met who just moved from California to Georgia, they didn't have a car, but they had all of the. They had enough official business to take care of, like medical or pharmacy needs and things like that, that they were able to basically arrange with the staff to allow the three of us to be able to leave the premises. Basically stating that they had to use my car, so I had to come with them, and they had to take care of official business. So what it meant is that during the pandemic and during the time that we were essentially being quarantined 24/7 inside the grounds of a homeless shelter, which ended up being for 3 months, by the way, there was at least some leeway where we could, at least once a week or something, at least once a week or something, or every few days, just kind of make arrangements to be able to leave for a little bit and just go and try to enjoy life a little bit during the quarantine. At the time we weren't exactly in North Georgia, but we were in, if anyone knows around where Ackworth, Georgia is, which is a little bit north. It's a little bit north of center, but it's a good ways north of center, but it's just shy of North Georgia. That's what I'll say. And so they managed to arrange for us to get to go out, and just for the maybe like the day a week that we got to get away from the shelter, because that can be stressful. You got people in all situations. You got people in all different situations. You got people, not just in all situations, but you've got some people had kids there, and it was maybe like 40 people basically, like kind of crammed into one room in bunk beds, I think just about on each level. There was like a men's and women's section, and there wasn't that much for us to do once the quarantine hit. We kind of just all had to stare at each other, read books, just try to. Thankfully they had, I guess, a little bit of TV, but we kind of just watched the news and just read. And so during the times that we got to get out, we would go around here and there to different shops, which was just a relief when you're quarantined inside, when your only options for I don't know, maybe food, drink, entertainment are just within certain grounds. It can definitely get you can definitely feel a little bit bogged down. And so we would go, and apart from doing normal things like, say, going to Walmart and getting snacks, or getting snacks to just have at the shelter, or things like that, they, as a couple, they were maybe a little bit older than me, maybe like in their 40s. I'm in my late 30s, and they were kind of an alternative couple. They were a little bit of a dark couple, maybe like rockers when they were younger, and so we would try to find parks that were open, So there's a lot of lake property where we were in Georgia, and so we would try to go so we could sit by the lake, but ultimately but ultimately all the parks were closed. Basically all the really nice parks in the area were closed down because everything was being quarantined. And so because of that, the one place that was opened, which the one type of park that was open were graveyards. Were graveyards. And so I ended up finding out that it was a little pastime of theirs as a couple to go to different graveyards, and hang out. And that was something that they had done as a couple for years. So during so during the lockdown, we would take a Saturday, just to get away and go to different graveyards in the area. And I mean, other than them being graveyards, most of them were, how do you say, like well maintained. It wasn't like they were dilapidated graveyards or anything like that. They, other than them being graveyards, they were relatively nice, upkept public spaces, upkept parks. And so during the spring of last year, I'd had the chance, probably first time in my life, to sort of go hang around at different graveyards, which basically was like, how do you say? Well, I mean, other than just being able to, hey, how's it? Other than just being able to just get out of the shelter and just get some fresh air and just chill in a little bit of nature, most of hanging out at graveyards is kind of just getting history. Is kind of just going and, like seeing who was there, and seeing what families lived in the area, and like it's all kind of historic. Seeing what families live in the area, seeing what sorts of unique tombstones people had, seeing what some of the oldest tombstones and grave sites were in the area. We ended up finding some that were, how do you say, like Confederate soldiers, for example, for Georgia. Some stuff that was historic for the area. Places where a whole bunch of soldiers rested. Places where different families were. And you see all kinds of different inscriptions, all kinds of different stories. You see some that, like are a little bit, like a little bit sad, like where it's young people, where it's children, and some where it's just really, really interesting things, where it's soldiers or it's matriarchs, like women who had a powerful presence in their community and who contributed. And so It was a little bit, a little bit of how do you say, not weird, but like not not the kind of not the kind of thing that you would think would be a go-to place to have a pastime or to spend, but it's okay because I'm also a little bit weird, and it ended up being more than I'd expected. That's what I'll say. It ended up being more than I'd expected, since it was the first time for me. And so I think my favorite. Oh, and so that's actually why I mentioned I mentioned the Japanese grave, the Japanese graveyard, that was right at the beginning of the video, because at some point I will definitely check it out. I will definitely show you guys and walk through there, mainly just because I guess I have just a little bit more of an appreciation for it than I had previously. I think previously I'd only done that one time. I'd only walked through a graveyard one time, and this is back in New York. I think it must have been in Brooklyn or Queens. And yeah, you kind of just get to see a little bit of who people were, find out a little bit of people's stories. My favorite tombstone ended up being one that was shaped in the shape of an arm with a hand pointing up to the sky. Like sort of letting whoever happens to walk by know where to pay attention to. So a little bit weird of a story to tell, but I thought I'd share it. This entire year has been really quite something. It's really something to remember where I'd been during really the height of the pandemic, when everything was on lockdown, and now see where everything is now, where we're just now starting to see places like New York and California finally have enough people vaccinated so that they can begin basically returning to normal. I meant to check the. Oh yeah, we've got a bonsai show coming up here. There's also a beer festival that I meant to look at. It's across the street. Let me see if I can see the details. June 26th. Oh, it's a virtual event. Brewfest in a box. It's a virtual event. Well, that's no fun. I don't know about that. I have to check and see where the vaccination levels are for Hawaii. I know I've taken a look just this past weekend at people who shoot videos in New York walking around, and I mean, based on their footage, it looks like a lot of people are vaccinated. They say they're at about 70% of people, I think, with one shot. And so, based on the footage looked like it almost looked normal. Like there were a lot of good chunks where the walkers were walking around and you didn't see anyone with masks on. So that is actually really good. It means that I expect that it'll take a whole nother year. Like, by this time next year, everything should be back to normal. By this time next year. You can see you've got these kind of fluffy rain clouds. It's been raining at night again lately, a little bit, which I'm glad about. I mean, I'd spent the first 6 months here just getting rained on relentlessly, not really having been prepared for just the sheer amount of precipitation in Hilo. I mean, I was thinking Hilo was gonna be maybe a little bit like